She was just trying to go home after work. A black woman, a nurse. No weapons, no crime, no threat, yet within seconds officers opened fire. Quick flashes of police lights, a woman on the ground, army boots stepping out of a vehicle. But they didn't know her brother was a top-ranking U.S. Army officer, and he was about to bring something they never expected. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments where in the world are you watching from. If you believe in truth and justice, like this video and subscribe for more powerful stories. This isn't just a story of bullets and badges. It's a story of silence broken, justice rising, and the U.S. Army stepping in when the system failed. Let's go back to the moment it all began. Magnolia Avenue, 4:42 p.m. The heat of the day was thick, and then the first scream rang out. It was 4:42 p.m. on a humid Friday in Shreveport, Louisiana, when the first scream tore through Magnolia Avenue. Nia Reynolds had just clocked out of her job at the local hospital, where she worked double shifts as a trauma nurse. Drenched in sweat and exhaustion, she didn't stop at home. She had one more errand. Her younger brother, Jamal, needed new shoes for his ROTC drill, and she had promised to stop by the outlet store on her way home. Nia wasn't one for delays, but when she saw a small white dog limping near the sidewalk, she pulled her car over and stepped out. That simple decision changed everything. Across the street, a police cruiser sat idling. Inside were two white officers, Corporal Daniel Reese and Sergeant Cole Bowers, both known in the department for their old-school style of policing. The kind that rarely ended with paperwork, but always ended with bruises. Reese's hand rested on his weapon. Bowers sipped coffee like he was watching a show. "There she is," Bowers muttered, nudging Reese. Reese squinted. "She fits the description." "What description?" Bowers laughed. Reese grinned. "The usual." Without a word, the cruiser pulled forward and turned hard onto the curb. Tires screeched. Nia froze. "What the?" she began, but Reese was already out, barking. "Hands where I can see them, now." She looked confused. "Excuse me." "Don't talk," Bowers yelled from the other side, weapon already drawn. "Get on the ground." Nia looked around. No one else was in sight, just the breeze, the sun, and the empty sound of a slow Friday dying. "I didn't do anything," she said, backing away. "What's going on?" "You match a description," Reese said, moving in fast. "For what?" she asked. "For moving your mouth too much," he snapped. Then, pop, a single shot rang out. Nia gasped, clutching her side as her knees hit the pavement. Blood poured through her fingers. Bowers lowered his gun, expression blank. Reese looked around quickly. "She moved at me," Bowers muttered. "No, she didn't," Reese said low. "She did," Bowers repeated, louder now. "You shot her, man," Reese whispered. "You shot an unarmed woman." And then they heard it. Doors slamming open. Shouts. Running footsteps. A group of teenagers from a nearby corner store rushed out. Phones raised. "Oh my God," one girl cried. "You shot her." Another teen live-streamed. "They just shot her. She was walking. She was just walking." Bowers cursed under his breath. "We're screwed." Reese grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 21. Shots fired. Suspect aggressive. Officer in fear for life. Requesting medical backup." "Stop lying," a teen shouted. Bowers paced in circles. "Tell him she reached. Say she went for something." "She didn't," a bystander said coldly. "We saw everything." Then came the first siren. Ambulance. Late. 20 minutes later. Nia lay unconscious in the ER, the very one she had worked in hours before. Her hospital badge was still clipped to her scrubs. Her fellow nurses hovered over her in panic. "She's one of ours," someone yelled. "Keep her breathing." Across town, Police Chief Roland Durham reviewed body cam footage at his desk. Except there was none. Both cameras were mysteriously malfunctioning. The officer reports claimed Nia lunged. Witness videos showed otherwise. But when those videos started flooding social media, the department couldn't hide. And at that same moment, on the other side of the country, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, a call came into a restricted number. "Major Reynolds," the voice said. "It's about your sister." Major Caleb Reynolds had led operations in Kandahar, served under top generals, and survived ambushes in Syria. But nothing prepared him for the words that followed. "She's alive," the voice said. "But she was shot by police. Unarmed. Point blank. She's in critical condition." Caleb's hand tightened around the phone. "Who shot her?" "Two local officers. Their department's trying to contain it, but the footage is spreading." Caleb didn't speak. He didn't breathe. He just stood there. Then, "Put me on emergency leave. Effective immediately." Back in Shreveport, public anger was boiling. News vans parked outside the hospital. Protesters gathered at the police station. Hundreds carried signs. Nia's face was everywhere. "Nurse, not a threat. Unarmed and shot. She saved lives. They tried to take hers. Inside the precinct, Bowers was losing it. Why is the media calling her a hero? She was resisting. She wasn't even speaking. Reese muttered. This is war, Bowers growled. No, Reese replied. This is your mistake. That same hour, Caleb Reynolds landed at the local airstrip in civilian clothes. A government vehicle awaited him. But he didn't go to the hospital. Not yet. He went to the street corner, the site of the shooting. He knelt where his sister's blood had dried into the pavement. Silence wrapped around him like armor. He took a long breath. Then he stood and made a phone call. I need a federal inquiry. Bring in oversight. Start pulling badge histories, complaint records, and body cam audits. No delays. Who's authorizing this? The voice on the line asked. I am. And you are, he replied calmly. I'm Major Caleb Reynolds, U.S. Army Intelligence. Clearance Level 4. Inside the hospital, Nia stirred. Tubes in her chest, beeping monitors. Her hand twitched. Her eyes didn't open. But her pulse was stronger. Outside, the media pressure mounted. Witnesses were being interviewed on national networks. The live stream had been replayed over 5 million times. And at police headquarters, Chief Durham sat quietly as a convoy of black SUVs pulled up out front. From them stepped men and women in federal uniforms, marked only by small patches. U.S. Army Oversight Command. The receptionist blinked. Can I help you? A woman with a sharp bob and mirrored sunglasses replied. We're here about the shooting. All files, reports, and officers involved are now under direct federal review. Who authorized this? The clerk stammered. A tall figure stepped forward, calm, focused, deadly. Major Caleb Reynolds. I did. The walls inside Shreveport Police Department began to sweat tension. Everyone on the force had heard by now the U.S. Army had arrived, but not in uniforms and tanks. They came with clipboards, encrypted tablets, and the kind of access that made rank and badge useless. Their arrival was swift, quiet, and terrifying. Sergeant Cole Bowers sat stiffly in the interrogation room. No badge, no belt, just sweat sliding down his temple. Across from him sat 2 Army oversight officials in gray suits with no name tags, just notepads and emotionless expressions. We're going to ask you to walk us through what happened on Magnolia Avenue, one said. Bowers rubbed his fingers nervously. The suspect, the woman, she looked suspicious. We thought she had a weapon. She had nothing but a coffee cup and hospital scrubs, the man across from him replied. You discharged your weapon within 45 seconds of arrival. Bowers shifted. She moved. I thought. Sergeant, the woman interrupted, do not insult our intelligence. The entire country has seen the footage. Meanwhile, in another room, Corporal Daniel Reese was biting his nails. His interview hadn't started yet, but he knew it would be worse, much worse. Outside the department building, Major Caleb Reynolds watched calmly from behind his dark aviators. His face betrayed nothing, but inside he was a controlled storm. The uniformed officers who passed him either avoided his gaze or whispered under their breath. In less than 18 hours, he had filed a motion through internal military channels to open Operation Silence Breaker, an interagency probe designed for uncovering corruption when federal jurisdiction was obstructed or local systems failed. He had authority now, real authority. But he wasn't interested in shaking hands. He wanted names, files, and answers. He walked through the front entrance like he owned the place. On his hip, a sealed manila envelope. He went straight to the chief's office. Chief Roland Durham looked like he hadn't slept. His tie hung loose. His hands trembled slightly. You're here early, he said, standing as Caleb entered. Caleb dropped the envelope on the desk. Internal complaints against Bowers and Reese. 17 in total, all sealed, suppressed, signed by your name. Durham blinked. Where did you get? Army intelligence has its methods. You buried these complaints, most of them from black residents. You called it cleaning up the streets. But this wasn't policing. This was hunting. Durham sighed. I didn't order them to shoot that girl. No, Caleb said coldly. You gave them the badge that told them they could. He leaned closer. You're going to turn over every case these men ever touched, every sealed report, every deleted file, or I'll call the Pentagon myself. Durham hesitated, then nodded. I'll have them by noon. Caleb stood, already heading for the door. And Chief, he added, pausing, when this is over, you're going to resign. At the hospital, Nia's room was quiet except for the beeping monitors. A nurse stepped in and gently dabbed her forehead. Her vitals were steady now. The bullet had missed her heart by inches, but her recovery would be long. On the windowsill sat a small bouquet from her coworkers. On the nightstand, a photo of her and Caleb as kids. He hadn't visited yet, not because he didn't care, but because the battlefield wasn't at her bedside. It was in the precinct, the files, the silence. That silence was starting to crack. At 2 p.m., the Army oversight team discovered a sealed locker deep in the precinct archive room. Inside, dozens of VHS tapes, external hard drives, and old complaint letters that were never filed. Most were labeled with victim names, some now deceased, some missing. One case stood out. Deshaun Ellis, age 23, pulled over for a broken taillight. Officers involved, Reese and Bowers. The file said routine stop, suspect ran. But the video, it showed Deshaun kneeling, hands in the air, as Reese shouted slurs and kicked him in the ribs before dragging him away. The boy never made it to jail. That tape alone warranted federal charges, and it wasn't the only one. By 5 p.m., word had spread through Shreveport like wildfire. Military investigators had found years of buried abuse. Caleb stood before a press podium in front of the station, flanked by Army officials. He faced reporters calmly. "My name is Major Caleb Reynolds. I'm here not just as a military officer, but as the brother of a woman who was nearly killed by the very people sworn to protect her. Today, we uncovered disturbing evidence of long-standing abuse, racial profiling, and systemic corruption within this police department. Effective immediately, the department will be placed under federal supervision pending a full investigation. Let me be clear, this isn't about one officer. This is about a culture, and that culture ends now." Flashes lit the sky. Microphones crowded. A reporter shouted, "How is your sister?" Caleb looked to the sky, then answered, "She survived." But too many others didn't. Back inside the precinct, Reese was escorted in handcuffs down the hallway. Reporters watched through the glass. Bowers followed minutes later, silent, pale, broken. They were loaded into separate federal vehicles, both men now facing civil rights violations, assault charges, and pending Nia's full recovery attempted murder. As the convoy pulled away, cheers rose from outside, but Caleb didn't smile. There was more. The entire city was holding its breath. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Caleb finally stood beside Nia's hospital bed. Her eyes were half open. Her voice was raspy. "You look tired," she whispered. Caleb smiled faintly. "You look better than them." She gave the ghost of a laugh. He sat beside her, took her hand gently, and said nothing. But in his mind, the next move was already forming. He had seen the list, other names, other victims, people the world had forgotten, and somewhere deep in that list was something even darker, something the Army hadn't seen coming. Rain rolled down the windows of the Oversight Mobile Command Unit parked outside Shreveport Police Department. Inside, monitors glowed with layers of archived footage, encrypted data, and redacted reports slowly being unsealed. The deeper the Army probe dug, the darker the rot appeared. Major Caleb Reynolds sat at the center, sleeves rolled up, fatigue lining his face but not dimming his fire. Beside him, a federal analyst named Avery Marsh scrolled through data clusters recovered from the precinct's wiped drives. "We've cracked most of it," Avery said, "but this one folder keeps spiking our firewall. Someone set up a multi-layered lock, military grade, within a city PD." Caleb raised a brow. "Yep," she nodded. "Which tells me whoever set it up wasn't your average beat cop." Caleb leaned closer. "What's in it?" "Only one label." Avery enlarged the folder name on the screen. It read, "Gideon Protocol." Meanwhile, across town, a man named Deputy Chief Gerald Stanton paced the quiet corridors of his private office. While most of the department scrambled under federal pressure, Stanton kept to himself, his eyes fixed on a flickering monitor. He was older, silver-haired, always calm. But beneath that calm was a calculating mind that had manipulated the system for decades. He had built the Old Boys Club that protected officers like Bowers and Reese. And now, that club was collapsing. He picked up the burner phone on his desk and dialed a private number. "Gideon is at risk," he said. "They found the vault." A voice replied, distorted and slow, "Contain the breach, no trails. If Reynolds digs further, we'll lose more than files." Stanton's lips tightened. "Then we remove the obstacle." Back at the command unit, Avery finally cracked through the firewall. Inside the folder were dozens of files, photos, logs, memos, all tied to an unofficial internal task force that predated the current leadership. Officers from multiple Louisiana cities linked through one objective: covert surveillance, illegal sweeps, suppression of minority activists, and classified containment ops under the guise of community policing. At the top of the list, Gideon Squad Unit 5, led by Sergeant Cole Bowers, Deputy Head Corporal Daniel Reese, Oversight Liaison, Deputy Chief Gerald Stanton. Caleb leaned back slowly. "This isn't just bad cops. This was a sanctioned hit squad," Avery whispered, "and they've been operating with state-level immunity for years." Caleb didn't respond right away. His jaw clenched. Then he tapped a button on the console. Patch me through to Pentagon Liaison Command. Top priority. While the investigation deepened, something else was moving through the city. Fear. Local protest groups received anonymous threats. Activists found their emails hacked. One organizer, Maria Knox, had her tires slashed outside her own home. In the shadows, old networks still whispered, but they weren't ready for what Caleb had in store. That night, Caleb met Maria in a secure parking garage under the city courthouse. She was tense, arms folded, eyes tired. "I've been organizing here for 10 years, she said, "but now folks are scared again. We thought after George Floyd we were done being hunted. We thought we were seen." "You are seen," Caleb said. "I'm not the only one watching. The Army's watching, and now the Justice Department is too." Maria scoffed. "We've heard that before." Caleb nodded slowly. "But you've never had a federal task force with military access, encrypted surveillance, and full warrant override parked 4 blocks from City Hall." She paused. "You're really not playing, are you?" Caleb looked her in the eye. "They nearly killed my sister, but she's just one name on a long list. I intend to expose every last one of them. I want your help to tell the public what we found, not for ratings, for truth." Maria took a breath, then nodded. "You've got it." The following day, chaos erupted. Deputy Chief Stanton held a press conference declaring the Army's involvement and overreach, and accused them of undermining local jurisdiction. His speech was fiery, full of blame and deflection, but 10 minutes later, Caleb took to the federal podium. Behind him on a large screen, the names of 32 victims appeared, black men and women who had faced beatings, disappearances, or unjust incarceration tied directly to members of the now exposed Gideon Protocol. The crowd gasped. News stations broadcast it live. One name stood out, Terrence Vale, a U.S. Army Reserve sergeant who was arrested during a peaceful protest and found dead in his jail cell. His case had been closed as suicide. Now it was listed as homicide, under internal review. Caleb turned to the press. "They didn't just kill civilians, they killed a soldier, one of ours. That's when this stopped being internal. That's when the U.S. Army got involved." Back at the precinct, panic spread. Gerald Stanton watched in rage as his empire unraveled. He grabbed the burner phone again and dialed fast. "Activate fallback. Remove Reynolds. Today." But the line was already silent, because someone had intercepted the call. Across the city, at a temporary military field office, a cyber intel unit monitored Stanton's signal. They triangulated his location and cross-referenced it with a secondary secure line traced back to an abandoned municipal building outside town. Caleb got the alert. "There's your nest," the officer said. Caleb didn't wait. Within minutes, 2 black tactical vehicles rolled out. He was riding shotgun, vest secured, weapon loaded. This wasn't paperwork anymore. This was extraction. They reached the building in 20 minutes. It was quiet, too quiet. Caleb and his team entered with formation, flashlights sweeping, safeties off. The place had once been used for city archives, but now it was stripped, eerie, and wired with surveillance equipment. A monitor was still flickering. Live camera feeds, streets, intersections, hospital entrances. "They were watching us this whole time," someone muttered. A red light blinked on one monitor. "Data uplink in progress." Caleb rushed to it. "Sir," Avery's voice came through comms. "They're trying to wipe the remaining Gideon files from a shadow server. You've got 90 seconds to pull the drive." He ripped the hard drive from the console, sparks flying. The screen died. "Got it," he confirmed. Then a low sound echoed from above. Footsteps. Boots. Suddenly, a hidden door in the ceiling burst open. Flash grenades dropped. "Down," Caleb roared. The blast rocked the room, disorienting everyone. Gunfire echoed from behind a wall. One of the soldiers shouted, "Ambush!" Caleb crawled toward the exit, dragging the drive. Dust clouded the room. He looked up, and through the smoke saw Stanton, escaping out the rear stairwell, disappearing into the night. Alarms were still ringing in the aftermath of the ambush. The hidden room, now shredded with bullet holes and blast marks, reeked of scorched wires and cordite. Caleb Reynolds stood with blood on his arm, not his but one of his team members, grazed during the chaos. "Get him stabilized," Caleb barked, helping lift the soldier into the emergency vehicle. "Patch in medical evac." Behind him, the stolen hard drive rested in a sealed tech case, encrypted but intact. It was now the only copy of the Gideon Protocol in existence, and somewhere in that drive were the missing links, bank transfers, personnel rosters, and likely the one name everyone at the center of this storm was still trying to protect: Deputy Chief Gerald Stanton. And Stanton had vanished like smoke. 2 hours later, in a dimly lit mobile ops room, Cyber analyst Avery Marsh plugged in the drive under 4 layers of military-grade firewalls. Code flooded the screen. Caleb watched silently, arms crossed, his eyes locked on the scrolling data. "Sir," Avery said, tapping rapidly, "we've got GPS tags, live tracking logs, photo evidence, communications between Stanton and Holdup." She leaned in closer. "There's a name attached to multiple encrypted authorizations, high clearance override, state-level access." She typed faster. The screen pinged green. Senator Richard Valentine, Louisiana, 3rd District. Caleb stepped back slowly. Valentine was Stanton's longtime political ally, a man known for law and order speeches, always pro-police, anti-federal intervention, but now he was exposed as the financial funneler of the Gideon Protocol. He funded off-the-books community operations that paid dirty officers to eliminate risks to social stability, meaning protest leaders, journalists, and even active-duty military personnel like Sergeant Terrence Vale. Caleb stared at the name. They tried to turn a city into a war zone, and they had a senator paying for it. Avery looked up. "What do we do?" Caleb didn't hesitate. "We go loud." By sunrise, U.S. Army intelligence had issued an encrypted federal warrant for Senator Valentine. That same morning, presidentially sanctioned oversight called for immediate arrest and seizure of all financial records tied to Gideon operations. National news exploded. Breaking: Senator implicated in racial task force corruption scheme. Louisiana scandal widens as Army releases evidence of hidden police death squad. Meanwhile, back in Shreveport, the police department was paralyzed. Protesters surrounded the station. Reporters shouted through megaphones. Inside, officers turned in their badges. Morale shattered. And Stanton? Still missing, until a tip came in. At 4:16 p.m., Caleb received an encrypted message. He's headed toward the state border. Disguised. Black Escalade. No plates. Highway 49 North. It was unsigned. Caleb activated rapid response. Air support up. We intercept at the Bossier exit. 30 minutes later, a black Escalade tore down the interstate. Inside, Stanton was unshaven, tense, gripping the wheel like a man holding onto a dying secret. His phone rang again and again. He didn't answer. In the rearview mirror, flashing lights appeared. 2 unmarked military SUVs closed in. He accelerated. Too late. A drone swooped overhead, cut him off, and deployed spike strips just ahead. The Escalade's tires exploded, skidding wildly across lanes before crashing into a ditch. Stanton stumbled out, bleeding from the nose, hand reaching for the gun inside his jacket. "Drop it," Caleb roared, stepping out of the SUV, weapon drawn. "I'll go down fighting," Stanton screamed. "No," Caleb said coldly, approaching. "You'll go down confessing." Stanton's hand hovered over the gun. A warning shot cracked beside him. He froze, then fell to his knees. Back at the hospital, Nia Reynolds sat upright in her bed for the first time since the shooting. The nurse smiled. "You're doing better today." "I feel strong," Nia whispered, like something lifted. Her brother walked in moments later. She smiled. "You caught him." Caleb nodded. "He tried to run, but truth travels faster." Nia took his hand. "How many others?" "Dozens," he said. "But they're not ghosts anymore. The whole world sees them now." She squeezed his hand. "Then it was worth it." That night, in a televised federal briefing, Major Caleb Reynolds appeared before the nation. Behind him stood members of his team, witnesses, and family members of victims long buried in sealed case files. He spoke with clarity and fire. "The system only works when we choose to confront its failures." The Gideon Protocol was not policing. It was terrorism disguised as law, funded by politicians, protected by silence, and driven by hate. But justice is louder now. He paused. "My sister didn't ask for war. She just wanted to go home after work. But when war came to our doorstep, we did what soldiers do. We fought back." Cameras flashed, applause followed, and justice kept moving. But even in victory, Caleb knew this wasn't the final battle. There were still files left unopened, names buried deeper, a network that spanned farther than Louisiana, and one message left on his secure phone. An encrypted video, no voice, just footage from a small Midwest town, a lone black man surrounded by cops, unarmed. The file was titled, "Gideon Resurrected." Caleb narrowed his eyes. The war wasn't over. It had just crossed state lines. Major Caleb Reynolds stood on the tarmac as a military cargo plane soared above. Behind him, armored trucks lined the base perimeter. What began as an investigation into his sister's shooting had spiraled into a nationwide operation. The leaked video, Gideon Resurrected, had exposed similar abuses in 3 other states. Same patterns, same cover-ups, same code words. Gideon wasn't a unit, it was a doctrine. And now the Army was done watching from the sidelines. The Pentagon authorized Joint Task Force Sentinel, a full-scope federal sweep backed by military oversight, FBI field teams and civilian justice liaisons. Their first stop, the very town in the leaked video, Oak Ridge, Missouri, where a small black community had gone silent under fear. This time, justice wasn't arriving with paperwork. It was arriving in convoys. Back in Shreveport, Sergeant Cole Bowers sat alone in a federal holding cell, hands cuffed, eyes hollow. He'd been through hours of interrogations, refused every lawyer, and now waited, broken. His only visitor that day was unexpected. Caleb entered the room without emotion. Bowers glanced up. "Why are you here?" Caleb stared at him through the glass. "To deliver the truth you never had the courage to face." Bowers said nothing. Caleb placed a file on the desk, untouched. "This is every name your unit buried, every life you silenced. They have faces, families, stories." Bowers exhaled. "It wasn't always like this." "That's the problem," Caleb replied. "You knew when it changed, and you stayed." He stood up. "Your silence fed the monster, and now it's choking on its own lies." Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Senator Richard Valentine was escorted into a closed federal courtroom where cameras weren't allowed, but history was. The evidence presented by Task Force Sentinel connected him to offshore accounts, bribes, and illegal appropriations. Whistleblowers from his former staff testified. Documents spoke louder than his campaign speeches ever had. He had thought himself untouchable. He was wrong. And when the gavel dropped, it echoed far beyond the courtroom. Back at the hospital, Nia Reynolds walked slowly down the hall, her first steps unassisted. Her nurses cheered quietly, watching a fighter return to her strength. In her hand she held a tablet streaming Caleb's press briefing. He was in Oak Ridge now, speaking from a church that had been vandalized during a protest just 2 weeks earlier. Caleb's voice came through strong. "To the communities who felt forgotten, we see you. To the officers who crossed the line, we're at your door. And to the families still waiting for answers, this is your moment." Nia smiled through tears. She had survived. But more importantly, others wouldn't have to fight alone anymore. In Oak Ridge, Caleb met with a local woman named Naomi Brooks. Her son had been one of the faces in the leaked footage, beaten, arrested, and falsely charged. "He never fought back," Naomi whispered. "He just stood there, and they dragged him away." Caleb sat with her on her porch, surrounded by neighbors holding candles. "You're not alone anymore," he said, "and your voice just became part of something bigger." That night, national headlines blazed. Army Task Force sweeps Midwest in nationwide justice operation. Black communities finally heard. Federal action strikes back. 2 weeks later, Caleb returned to Shreveport. Nia met him at the gates of their childhood home. She was stronger now, walking tall, scars still healing, but no longer defining her. "You changed the world," she said. He smiled faintly. "You gave me the reason to." They sat on the porch together as the sun began to set. No sirens, no choppers, just peace. Nia turned toward him. "So what now? Do you go back to command?" He looked into the distance. "No," he said. "I go forward." In the months that followed, Stanton was convicted on multiple federal counts, including conspiracy, evidence tampering, and civil rights violations. Senator Valentine was sentenced and stripped of all political honors. The Gideon Protocol was declared a domestic threat policy, banned nationwide with all participating officers blacklisted from law enforcement. Nia Reynolds returned to work, not just as a nurse, but as a public advocate for policing reform and community trauma care. And Caleb Reynolds was appointed to a historic new role, Director of Justice Operations under the Department of Defense, overseeing civilian-military cooperation in racial justice enforcement. He would no longer be just a soldier. He would be a sentinel. On the 1-year anniversary of the shooting, a memorial was held on Magnolia Avenue, the same corner where it all began, where the blood of a nurse almost went unnoticed. Now, that same corner bore a bronze statue of Nia, standing, not falling. A plaque beneath it read, "She stood for us, now we stand for her." And behind the crowd, Caleb watched quietly, not as a hero, but as a brother,